Hello everybody, welcome back to part 7. Going to talk about how to set up your tune and load on your tank circuit, the tank coil, and the tune and load capacitors. Gotta find my paperwork here. Okay, we have coax coming in here, hooked to the load control, and got some dummy load resistors that substitute the tube. There are two 2K resistors in series, and that makes up 4,000 ohms. Now, according to the tube data sheet, a plate voltage of 2,000 volts gives us a 4,000 ohm impedance on the plate. The coil is 7 turns, 12 gauge, 1 1/8 inch diameter, and 1 1/8 inch long. Alright, this is, I've already got it tuned up, but I'm just going to knock it off out of tune, and you can see, if you can see the SWR meter, see it swing up. And all we're doing is looking for 0 SWR. See, I'll even knock this one off, and then we'll come back and find it. Just keep back and forth. Keep getting that needle lower and lower and lower till it settles right down there, and we basically have no movement at all. And you know your SWR is matched. You'll have a little bit different on your circuit depending on how long your leads are, but I've already taken this apart after it was tuned and measured the load cap and the plate, and the tune cap was 40 picofarad, 40 picofarad, and the load cap come out at 317 picofarad. Now this one here is too small. It's a 250 puff cap, so I've got it a padding of 100 puff on it, and it's almost fully meshed. Again, I actually probably need to put in one more 100 or go find a 200 puff cap, or you know, with everything's perfect I would have had just a bigger cap on here, but this is what I had, and this is how you can make what you have work for you. If you don't have a 300 or 400 picofarad load cap, just use one that's smaller, and you can substitute or add a disc capacitor of 100 picofarad across it. Now the disc capacitor needs to be fairly heavy, needs to be able to handle 1,000 volts or so. So keep that in mind. All right, now move from that here. I want to talk about a little more about tube sockets. I didn't remember to cover this on an earlier video. Okay, if you got a tube socket like that, I want to caution you, if you're trying to figure out how to mount this thing and it didn't come with mounting hardware, do not, and I repeat, do not try to drill a hole down anywhere through on this flange. That was my first mistake when I made my first amp. What it is, inside here there's a built-in screen capacitor. It's about a 15 picofarad, or 1500 picofarad cap. And these little pins, the fingers, what they do is they grab around the screen. This is the screen ring of the tube. And they connect up against it. When you plug the tube in, they snug up around it and make contact with it. And when the tube is out, there's no contact between it and the screen pin on the socket. So a way to test these, when you get them, take an ohm meter, go from this outside ring to one of these, any one of these fingers are all hooked together, go from here to one of the fingers, and you should not get any continuity at all. If it is, your socket's not bad, but what you'll have to do, very carefully, you'll have to break these fingers off so that they don't make contact with the screen. Because there is a pin on the tube where the screen connects, and on the ceramic, a lot of tubes, you can see a little silver band going from the pin right out to that outside ring. And what happens when you hook that on there, if these are shorted, it'll short out your screen circuit. So be aware of that and don't drill any holes in here. To make mounting hardware, get a hold of a piece of angle. You can see that. Get it in the camera there. Some aluminum angle iron, or angle. Yeah, angle iron. From a, I don't know, Home Depot might carry it, or some kind of building center. Go look in their, I think they usually have like all thread, and they should have a good assortment of this. Should be able to find it anyhow. Angle aluminum. And it's one I use is 3/4 by 3/4 by 1/8 of an inch thick. Okay, what you do then, set that in a vise and cut off anywhere from 3/8 to a 1/2 inch wide piece. You want to make 3 of these. Then you're going to turn that around, and once you get it, put it back in the vise and cut off. I don't know if you can see that. I get something to get behind it here. You see, it's a little tiny L shape. So you want to cut off part of that angle. And what you're going to do, clean that all up with a file, and you're going to come over here on the side. This dot is where you put your hole. That'll go down through the chassis, and that becomes your hold down clamp for the tube. You got to make 3 of these. Now, one thing to make allowance for, don't drill your holes until you have, like this. Get that in there. Okay, don't drill any holes until you have a tube in the socket and your chimney, have it on there. Then you'll know how far you can put that in to where it can come up against the chimney, but you don't want to interfere with how the chimney sets on the socket. And what that'll do is that'll make a nice little hold down clamp, and just kind of the little toe on here will hold this to where it's not tipped. So if you use a washer, they're going to be tipped, and they're going to try to distort or push the socket around. So all you want is just to pinch down in 3 places around the socket. Okay, that's that type of socket. There are different ones with different ways of mounting, but I thought I'd cover that one. On eBay and from Fair Radio, there's an old pair of sockets that they still have available. I see them, I checked the other day, and eBay still has these. They're $27 for a pair, plus shipping. I don't know what the shipping is. But these sockets will work. They do not have an internal, a built-in screen capacitor, bypass cap, so you'll have to make sure you add like a minimum of 3 .01s on the screen lead to ground, and real short leads. You don't want anything longer than a 1/4 inch on the socket end, and no longer than a 1/2 inch out to a ground lug on the other end of that disc capacitor. And those need to be a 0.01 at 1000 volts. And there's two sockets. You'll have to take them off. They're fastened down with screws and little nuts. And you can flip this thing over, clean it all off. Yeah, a couple screws you got to remove. Then it'll set down flat on your chassis, and you can go through and mark where the shape of the chassis, because it's not, if you can see them, they're kind of castled. They go in and out, a little notched, and in between the voids is where your pins come through. And then see, there's a screw, then there's a void, and then a screw, and it continues that way all the way around the socket. But that's, again, that's just another one that's available out there, and you can get two of them for 27 bucks. But I'm just trying to point out they don't have a screen bypass capacitor, so you'll have to make sure and add that. Okay, and I want to touch on high voltage lead. RG58, either AU or 58U with neoprene insulator. You don't want to try to use the foam. You want the neoprene, the kind of a translucent vinyl neoprene insulator. Leave the jacket on it and leave the braid, because you're going to want to tie right to ground. You put an eyelet, solder an eyelet on the end, and you'll have a little strain relief like a ceramic standoff, and you're going to attach that inside your tube cabinet. This is if you're going to, say, have a power supply that's separate from the amp, and you need to go, 3 or 4 feet. Now, if you have animals, pets that like to chew, I would suggest that you run this inside of some BX. And then if you go to a electrical supply store, they have the ring connectors. You drill about a 3/4 inch hole. They fasten to the chassis with a little ring nut, and there's a couple screws that tighten down, and you can slide that BX in there, and that'll add another safety ground, and then run that BX all the way to your power supply and do the same thing on the other end. That'll make that safe, and they won't be able to bite through that coax and get shocked. 2000 volts is really lethal, and there is no kind of shock. It's pretty much definite death and pain until you don't feel anything more. So keep that in mind. If you don't use this, and you need lead for inside your cabinet, if your power supply is inside the box, what they used to call TV anode lead, it's good for like 25,000 volts. You could use that, or you could strip this out, and this would be good enough. You can, the dielectric on here is strong enough that you could let it lay right up against the chassis and it wouldn't arc through. So this is a source of good high voltage wire. But like I say, don't try to use the foam, because any kind of a distortion or a pinch, it'll make that wire migrate out to the edge of the foam, and it could arc through. This is a much tougher wire and really good to use for high voltage lead. Okay, I think that's about got it covered. Next video, I'll start talking about cabinets, and I had a question asked, so I thought I'd at least address that. We'll get into the creation and a couple ways that you can make the air box for the tube. I like to use copper clad fiberglass board. That's what I use. You cut it with tin snips. You can shape it any way you want, notch it out, and then solder it together. And speaking of solder, yeah, try to find the good, something like Kester lead solder. This new no lead solder isn't really any good for anything but cold solder joints. So find yourself some good rosin core 60/40 lead solder when you solder, make your connections in the box, and when you go to, if you're going to assemble the box this way, you can solder all the seams. They all come out really nice and it's sturdy. There's no good source of boxes. I looked, my old source used to be Bud Industries. They used to make a good little square box that had a top plate and a bottom plate. You could take one of the top plates, lay it on the chassis, mark through the holes, and then mount the fan in the bottom of your top chassis. And then when you put the box over that, you could use the screws, the holes that you drilled in there, and mount the box on it. And then the top, you can mount your tube plate in the top of the box, and again, 4 screws, and the thing went right on. It was a really neat little cabinet, and it, like I said, it had a removable top and bottom, but I just checked, and I don't believe they're made anymore. I'm going to look again when I go in town. I got faster internet. It just seemed like it took forever to load, and it didn't come up. It just says you searched for, and it didn't give me any results. So maybe they're still available. The number I looked for, I think, was a CU. I think it was a CU729. I'll have to recheck that. But it's called a utility cabinet. But failing that, you can make one real easy out of copper clad. Your underside of the tube needs to be sealed from RF, and it needs to be pressurized, because you're going to pump pressurized air underneath the tube, and it's going to come up through the chimney. So the bottom underside of your chassis has to be, you have to be able to seal that up. Okay, I see my battery indicator showing me that it's about ready to tell me it's a dead battery. So any questions, email me and make comment, and please hit the like button to vote for the video series. Thank you. See you in number 8.